I will say welcome back to another episode of All About Balance. And today I am joined again by the strongest man in jiu-jitsu, and that is Mr. Raspberry Ape himself, Mr. Daniel Strauss. How you doing, my friend?
Very, very good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. All
Awesome.
good. Yeah, we were just talking off air about how beautiful the weather has been. It's been fucking beautiful here in London, and yeah. I mean, what did you do? What did you do yesterday when the weather was good? Did you do anything?
What did I do? I lifted I didn't. I rolled yesterday, so it was a hot, sweaty
Nice.
session on the mats
Gross.
yesterday.
Gross.
Enjoyed the weather. Shot some arrows. You know,
You shoot some arrows?
Yeah. I'm gonna, just like to play around with the bow sometimes. So when the weather's good, it's a good excuse to get out there and do it. Read, and that's about it for me. Eat,
Mate, that sounds
read,
amazing.
fight.
That sounds amazing.
Like
that's proper caveman shit, right? It's proper caveman shit. What made you start shooting?
Look, I've always been into that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But I had a bow years ago, but only recently did I decided that I wanted to get a compound bow.
Okay.
And start focusing with the intention of hunting one day. And then I was shooting compound a little bit because I don't know if you've ever seen a compound bow. They're crazy, mate.
Yeah.
Like the technology that's gone into, like, one of the earliest weapons known to man, the technology that they put into it, the precision. But then, to be honest, I got some more recurve bows. I actually prefer the old style stick and string without all the fancy gadgets. So it's just a nice thing. It's almost like a bit of meditation, a bit of skill practice. I always like to kind of test myself, get myself training my mind in different ways. Archery is just one of those things where, one of those things to do. And it's cool as well.
Yeah, man, it's fucking super cool. Like, I've only ever done one session of archery, but I'm like, I need to get involved. Like, this was just before lockdown hit. We did our first session of archery, and I was like, yeah, I need to get involved in this shit. It's great.
Yeah, it's
really,
awesome.
really good.
But I want to. The goal is eventually to hunt. Unfortunately, you can't bow hunt in the UK. But
really, is that illegal?
Yeah, it's illegal in the UK to bow hunt. There's a few different reasons. It's kind of bullshit, but whatever. But get out to Europe or the States and do some bow hunting. But I also want to learn to ride horses as well, so I can do horseback archery. It's one of the things I want to do. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that would be fucking phenomenal. I need to see videos of that. Like, what would be great is, because you're used to lifting unconventionally big and weird shaped shit.
See if I can lift up a horse, right?
See if you can lift up a horse, and also see if you can lift up your opponent. As you're riding, and just see if you can fucking lift it.
Okay, yeah. I get you.
But yeah, on the bow hunting thing, like, that's actually something that the reason I got into archery or wanted to start archery is because I also wanted to learn how to bow hunt. Like, I think maybe an unpopular opinion, but I think that there should almost be a little bit of a rites of passage to eating meat now. And I think that it should be like, could you, not you specifically, but as the plural of you, could you go out, hunt an animal, whatever it is, a chicken, a rabbit, whatever, a big deer? Could you prepare that animal after you've killed it, after you've hunted it? Could you then take it home to your family and feed them with it? Because if you couldn't do that, I'm not sure that you should be able to eat meat. And in this vein, I shouldn't be able to eat meat right now, because whilst I can shoot a really fancy, clever, technological bow from 50 meters inside a really nice, well air-conditioned room, doing that on a live animal is obviously like worlds different.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're right. I think I was having this discussion last night, actually, at training, and I was talking to a friend of mine. I think it's very funny, without getting too much off topic and talking about veganism and stuff like that.
No, let's go. Let's do it.
But there's sort of like there's a weird way that a lot of people would see hunters as a evil form of meat eaters, right? So you've got like your vegan who never wants to hurt an animal.
Sure.
You've got the vegan doesn't like people who eat meat because they pay for animals to get killed in abattoirs or whatever.
Yep.
And then, but even worse than people who just eat meat is people who go and hunt the animal themselves. When in reality, it's and the crazy thing is sometimes a meat eater will think that hunting's bad, which does have no complete disconnection.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, the reality is, and this is the reality, that hunting and game animals is by far the most ethical and environmentally friendly way to sustain your body. By far. It has less of an impact on the environment than being on a complete vegan diet. It has less of a, you kill less animals. Vegans they are not guilt-free when it comes to killing animals as part of their food. When you can talk to any farmers who farm crops, animals die when they, to sterilize the land, and when crops get pulled and harvested, animals are killed. But hunter, you can kill one animal as ethically as you can. This is an animal that's lived all of its life in the wild. It's had a long and full life, and it's sired young. And you take it out as quick and painlessly as possible, which is not it's not a way. There is no Disneyland, fairy tale ending for an animal in the wild. They'll starve to death, or they'll get ripped apart by predators. The best that you can ask for as a deer is to have a long, happy life and then be shot by someone and be dead within 30 seconds. And that's it. That can feed a family for months. That can feed an individual, depending on the size of the animal, 6 months to a year. You can live off of that meat. It's by far, but still, they're really vilified. And I think one of those reasons, I think going back to what you were saying there, a lot of people who eat meat now wouldn't be able to go out and kill an animal. They wouldn't have it in them to go out and kill an animal. I believe that is because we have been brought up without the connection to the earth, without the connection to nature. I think that in a fantasy utopia, all humans are brought up with an understanding of the circle of life and with an understanding of nature and ecosystems, and they learn to forage and hunt and have more of a connection with wildlife. And I think that would allow people to kill, but also have respect for the animal that they're killing as well. So just because you kill things doesn't mean you don't respect them, which for a lot of people is a really complex and confusing subject.
Yeah, and I think the thing that baffles me the most is the people that eat meat that vilify the hunters, because it shows such a rabid disconnect for the way that the meat that they buy from Tesco or Sainsbury's or Asda's or whatever actually gets to that supermarket shelf. And I think until you have an understanding of how that meat gets to that shelf, it's very difficult for you to have an opinion on, like you say, going out, stalking an animal, killing an animal, or expiring an animal, if we're going to use the technological terms, and then living off that animal for 6 months, 7 months.
But anyway, that's how that came from. I shoot my bow a little bit yesterday. I'm gonna shoot my bow today as well, for sure.
And on, are you rolling still at Mill Hill?
No, I'm rolling in another location. Mill Hill isn't open yet.
An unidentified secret location.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that shit.
A deep underground bunker somewhere.
Yeah, and on the topic of rolling, like to go full disclosure, we did record an episode, or tried to record an episode.
We attempted to record half an episode,
but we had some technological problems. And we touched a little bit on Grapplefest, and I think it's important to touch on Grapplefest and to get your opinion on what happened in Grapplefest. And so let me just hand over to you. What were your thoughts on? Obviously, we're a couple of weeks removed now.
Yeah, so Grapplefest, like I said a few days ago, Grapplefest was not the match that I wanted. It was nice for me to get back out there. I felt good. I felt strong. Felt cardio was good. So I hadn't competed for over a year when I competed at Grapplefest. So it's good to get back out there. In terms of how the match actually went, I thought it was a very, very boring match. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure why Jackson acted the way that he did.
Sure.
Like I said to you before, I was unaware that there was any bad blood between us. I trained with him before. I'd met him before, and we were cool with each other. He definitely came in. I have no idea why. People messaged me afterwards saying what was wrong with Jackson, and I really have no idea. Maybe I'll find out one day. Maybe I won't. But he came in, and to be honest, even the majority of the match was pushing and shoving, no one really opening up for anything, and him booting me in the legs that were meant to be sweeps, but with like pretty good shin kicks for pretty much the 10 minutes. It popped open again yesterday. I was still bleeding from it. It was like a month ago that I had this fight. So yeah, he definitely got the last laugh there. And my hand is still wrecked as well. He was like grabbing individual fingers and bending them back, but whatever. Look, I almost understand that, kind of. Not really, but kind of, that you're just going to have a aggressive match. But then refusing the handshake afterwards was confusing for me.
Strange.
It really acted like I'd been talking shit about him, which I hadn't at all. So I'm not sure what was going on there, but like, you know, these things happen. I'm not concerned too much about it. It was just a shame that it had the potential to be a much better match than it was, and it was just a little bit boring, which I never like to be a part of.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest though, I don't think you came out of that with any less stock, or you know, or even Jackson to come out of that with any less stock. You know, I think the match that this kind of reminded me of was on Polaris, and it was Aria Esfan-Mendez versus Devontae Johnson, right? And those guys stood, and eventually Aria pulled. But I think when you have two heavyweights and neither of them want to pull, I kind of understand it. Like, I do understand it, because you don't want 100-kilo man on top of you, even if you are 100 kilos, like that. You just don't want that. So I absolutely understand that. And equally, I understand that sometimes you get drawn into a battle, right? And you said on the last episode that you wanted to test your stand-up against Jackson and see if you could, you know, initiate your wrestling, see if you could initiate your clinch game. And if that was the objective, then look, you didn't get taken down, so it's a good result, right? Like, okay, it's not the win that you wanted, and it's not the performance you necessarily wanted, but you went out there, and as you say, you got a what did you say, like a 5-day camp in or whatever, and you managed to go out and put on a performance, and I mean, if anything else, there was some press around you, and you got your name out there again in a quarantine time, and roll on the next one, right?
Yeah, totally. And you know, Jackson's an ADCC medalist, so it's definitely a standard that I am looking to know that I am on, and almost him having to fight so conservatively against me was a boost of confidence that's what he felt as the level that he had to do in order to kind of squeak past the win. So apart from the match being boring and my body being a bit banged up still from it, you know, it's nice to at least go, we had a crap match, but we're on a similar level, and that puts me in a good position going into ADCC and ADCC trials.
Yeah, and I think I do want to touch on this again, because I thought it was really interesting for me. Like, we talked a little bit about scoring and rule sets, and what your thoughts were on the Grapplefest and the Polaris rule set. And I just wondered if you could go over that again, because obviously on your card we saw a really, really dubious decision to me with Ellis Younger and Craig McIntosh. And again, no disrespect to either of those gentlemen, but I felt that Ellis won that as a grappling contest, but Craig managed to get the win via one submission attempt. And yeah, I mean, Jackson won your match supposedly via, I mean,
no submission attempts,
Jose Aldo leg kicks, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Definitely, if I had any other reason not to want to do MMA, then that match definitely
fair enough.
That position. I think we were talking about last time. I think a lot of organizations, they go they go in either direction. They go either in there's no, you know, if you say you're having a submission show, you're saying you're having a show without points. So then you need to decide how you're going to do it. Well, obviously, the most extreme way is there's no submission, the match carries on until there is. That doesn't work in a show format. That works if you're the only one and it's being streamed or something, but it doesn't work on an actual show because it would take potentially hours. It doesn't often, but it can take hours. So then you have to decide, are you going to do it in original Polaris style or Meta Morris style, where if there's no submission after 15 or 20 minutes, then it's a draw? Or are you going to do it in a decision way, which is what Grapplefest do, and it's what Polaris do now? And the problem with having a draw and we saw this in Polaris 3, was because that was the old motto of Polaris, was death before decisions. I've got the t-shirt because I love the t-shirt, death before decisions. And of course now, like a few events after, they brought in decisions, which is quite funny. But it was death before decisions. And then they had Polaris 3 and they had 8 matches on the main card. And every single match went to decision. It was all draws. It didn't go to decision. Sorry. They were all draws, 8 matches, all draws. And then they went, okay, this is not good. You can't have an entire Polaris where we don't have a single winner. So then they brought in the decisions. Now, the problem for me is, and this is what happened at the end of I was talking to some of the organizers and some of the team at Grapplefest, and they said it was really, really close. Nothing really happened, but we had to pick a winner. Now, that for me, I was like, well, do you? I think, and I don't know anyone that has done this. And I think it's so simple, which is, you have you have a show, you have a 15-minute match, 10-minute match, whatever. And at the end of the match, if there was a clear winner, then you give him a win. And if it was a close match, you give it a draw. That is what the difference between like a win, a draw, and a loss should be, right? Mm-hmm. If it was one-sided, it's a win. If you lost one-sided, it's a loss. And if it's not one-sided and it's really close, it's a draw. So I think in stuff like when you're comparing submission attempts, one submission attempt to multiple position dominance, sounds like that should be a draw. You know, when you're talking about 2 guys who barely hit the mat and nothing happened, that should be a draw. I think it is almost unjust to the audience and to the crowd when you don't want to see a match that's really close go to someone who you don't feel like was a clear winner, and you don't want to see someone who was a clear winner go to a decision and it be a draw. You know, so it works both ways. But yeah, personally, if I was to run a show, I would at least try that format. If it's super close, then it's a draw, and if it's one-sided, then it's a win. Simple as that.
I mean, would you put any super fights on at Kleos? And
we've put super fights on in Kleos in the past,
like with that rule set. I mean,
look, we haven't done Kleos. We haven't done any super fights at Kleos for a while, and the reason was super fights are a pain in the arse to organize because they pull out. People are flaky, and when you're running a tournament, you just can't be asked. Well, I'm not going to bother running a super fight because we're going to have a great tournament anyway. So we're just going to let the tournament crack on. And if you want to fight on Polaris and you're a black belt, enter the black belt division, you know? So we had some super fights, and then we had too many people pulling out and all of that crap, and we stopped doing it. I would like to put on a show though. And I've spoken about this in the past. I got very, very close to organizing one in the past, actually. I was just looking for a venue and it didn't materialize in the end. So yeah, I would like to put on a show at some point in the future, potentially using that rule set. Yeah,
you should do it. You really should. I mean, I think, I think the more shows that are out there, the more shows that are offering jiu-jitsu athletes a chance to make revenue, a chance to make brand exposure, a chance to just go out and test themselves competitively, you know, because there's obviously a big difference of a Kleos or a Pantheon or a Grapplefest or a Polaris. One, because it's televised. 2, because if you lose at Kleos, then it's only you that cares, right? Nobody has a record of that necessarily to be like, yeah, but you got fucked over in 30 seconds at Kleos. Like, nobody really cares. Whereas if you go out on a Polaris stage, it's there, it's recorded forever, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that's something that adds a little bit extra to those shows, a bit of grandiose to those shows. And obviously, you know, Polaris is at the moment the biggest in Europe, the biggest show in Europe for athletes. And that's even that's just by the athletes they've had on the show. They've had the Keenans, they've had the Gary Tonans, they've had the Gordons, they've had Imanari's and all these guys, right? They've had the Dan Strausses, right? Like, that's you know,
I was waiting for you to get to that.
Yeah, it's just like shit. I'm gonna throw that in there. But you know, those guys are still, as you touched on before with the Polaris Grapple tournament, they still have some rule set changes and tweaks to make, and I don't think there is going to be a perfect rule set. I think the closest we have to a perfect rule set is something almost akin to ADCC, where you have essentially 2 matches in one match, and it can kind of go however you want it to go, dependent on those two matches. But yeah, I mean, do you have plans for matches in the future, like up and coming soon?
No, I've got nothing booked at the moment. ADCC trials is beginning of October. Hopefully that still goes ahead. So you know, crazy times at the moment. We don't know whether that's going to be postponed or not. But yeah, so that's been moved from Moldova to Poland. That's the thing that I'm training for at the moment. That's the focus at the moment. If other shows come up, then I'll be down to jump on them and give them a go. But yeah, you know, I think you're right. I think different shows, you know, talking about the Grand Prix, because we touched on it last time we did it. I think the Grand Prix, the Polaris Grand Prix is great. I think that their rule set is bad. Their points, I didn't even know that they had a point system until I got there, and I just watched like the VT and I was like, what? There's a point system? And I think the point system was really bad. They awarded 1 point for all major transitions and positions, and no points for submission attempts. And if you're running a submission-based show and you suddenly reward everything but submissions, you're not going to have many submissions. So, which is what we saw in the card. We only saw one submission out of the entire Grand Prix. So, so I think that they could tweak that. I think that they just need to give points in some capacity for attacking the submissions.
And who impressed you out of that Grand Prix? Like, was there anything that you specifically took away? Like, wow, that was a good performance.
I know all of those guys, and I've known all of those guys for years. Some of those guys I've known for many, many, many years. It pretty much went exactly how I expected. You know, I think everyone's got to say that the big standout star of the day was actually Dominic Dillon, who really took it to Ross. Dominic's fought Ross a few times. I believe he was submitted both times. And in Ross's defense, he just really looked off his game that day. You know, I'm not taking anything away from Dominic.
No.
But Dominic's aware that Ross is a very, very high level, and Dominic had a very good day, and he caught Ross and he forced Ross to play into his game. And if it was Polaris, talking about this, Dominic looked so much better. And if that exact match had happened under Polaris rule set of a normal match, Dominic would have undoubtedly won. So a lot of people saying, oh, it was bullshit. The thing is, Ross is a extremely experienced competitor. And if that rule set was different and Ross was losing the match,
he'd have fought different.
Would have competed. He would have fought differently. Would it have been enough? I don't know. Maybe he really was having a terrible day. I don't know. But Ross is incredibly good. He knows the rules. He understands how to win above everything else. Yes. So it's not quite as easy to say Dominic would have beaten Ross if they had a normal Polaris match. It's not that simple. And I think if Ross, you know, it's kind of a lose-lose for Ross, because he is on a much higher ranking than Dominic is. But if Polaris offered Ross the chance to rematch him in a normal show, Dominic would definitely jump at it and should, and because it's a win-win for him. Ross is definitely in a worse position, but if he's the sort of guy who will take that match anyway. Yeah, I think Ross will take it, and then that will be interesting. But I don't think the match looks the same. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, what I do know is that, I mean, Ross said himself on the broadcast that he was having a bad day, right? And I thought that was actually incredible.
100% he was having a bad day.
To have the humility to, in the middle of, I think it was after a semi-final match with Bradley, and he was like, look, I'm having a shit day, but thankfully I've got through to these two matches, and let's see what happens with Freddie. Yeah. And of course, you know, Freddie did Freddie, and that's fine. But I had a quick chat with Ross afterwards, and he said, look, like, I didn't even have a training camp for this. I haven't rolled. I haven't trained. He said I had a couple of sessions beforehand. But
bullshit. Ross said that?
Ross said that.
Bullshit. Yeah. Bullshit. Ross Nichols, you're fucking training, mate. I'm not buying that for a second. I'm not buying that for a second.
I don't know.
Look, I love Ross. He might be right. But look, I'll tell you one thing. A lot of people didn't take a break over lockdown. Okay.
Yes, that's true.
I took 3 months off. I didn't touch a mat for 3 months. Ross seems to be claiming that he also took a long time off. I find that hard to believe because I know Ross, and Ross cannot stay off of a mat. But I know that a lot of the other people in that tournament, there were some people in that tournament who had genuinely not trained for months. And there were some people in that tournament who had never stopped training for a day, you know? So, yeah, I don't know. Ross saying that he only trained a couple of times. I'm not buying it. I'm sorry, Ross. I'm not buying it.
We did a Pantheon podcast with Ross. And when we were talking about coronavirus, actually, before I spoke with Ross and spoke with Liam that day, I was kind of a bit blasé about the whole thing. Yeah. But Ross was and did take it extremely, extremely seriously. Yeah. So I really would not be surprised. And I would not be surprised if he didn't train. I wouldn't be surprised if he did take the time off. I know that he also had some personal achievements in his own life that he was doing during coronavirus time. So it really wouldn't surprise me if he didn't train. And
look, I'm happy to stand corrected if I'm wrong, because I don't know how seriously Ross is taking or did take the whole virus. Yeah. But all I know is that Ross is he's addicted to the mats.
Of course.
But fair play. Look, if he took time off, then fair play. But I know for a fact that there are a lot of people in that tournament who did not take any time off.
And I think the other three takeaways I had from the tournament was Bradley Hill came with a bit of a "you must have forgot" moment, right? Like getting the only submission of the Grand Prix. But I feel like Bradley is a little bit slept on in the UK scene. I feel like that anyway.
I don't know. Bradley's always got that swagger, by the way. He always carries it. It's brilliant. Bradley's a great grappler.
Phenomenal grappler.
And I don't think he necessarily gets slept on. He just doesn't really compete as much sub only as some of the other people do. He competes internationally, and he does a lot of IBJJF tournaments. And they're just it's a different demographic of viewers. To be honest with you, it's just a different demographic. I think Brad is well respected, both from the newer generation and also from the old school. Brad's been training for a hell of a long time.
Long time. I think I'd really like to see Brad jump into some more sub-only tournaments. I really would.
I think we're going to see that. And he has done stuff. He does gi and no gi, which is what a lot of, there are very few people on that mat on the Polaris Grand Prix that gi and no gi. So yeah.
Taylor's the only other one that does it frequently, right?
I'd say
Taylor competes more in the gi than he does no gi, I think.
Yeah, Taylor is more of a gi guy for sure. And I'd probably say that Brad's more of a gi guy than no gi guy, to be honest with you. But Brad just does a lot of both. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see him back on Polaris. He's been on Polaris a few times already, and I'm sure we'll see him back on it.
I mean, the other standout was Taylor for me. I thought his match with Nastasa was really good, and I actually thought his match with Freddie was pretty good. That Tarika Plata setup was almost there a couple times, and at the very end, obviously, it was a bit closer. And Freddie gave that nonchalant look, which usually tells you that something's happening. Like with boxers or MMA fighters, they get clicked and they like shake their head like that's not there, and you're like, okay, that hurt, like that hurt.
Yeah.
That tells me that Tarika Plata was close. But Taylor obviously got his black belt a couple of days ago, so yes. Big shout out to Taylor for that. It's a phenomenal achievement. White to black with Alan Pozo, that's also an incredible achievement for both of them. But yeah, I thought Taylor looked really good in his matches, and I think the other one was Jed Hugh, right? Like Jed just looks.
Yeah, Jed's is really kind of the number one up and comer at the moment. I think we need to see him tested a little bit more. Dean is a training partner of mine and he's a teammate of mine. But they've competed before. Yes. They competed at the Polaris Trials, and it was a relatively close match, and Dinu almost had a submission. Dinu seems to. And it was the same for the Polaris match as well. He almost had that really nice Bravo setup.
Oh man, that was so nice.
He just doesn't seem to. I think Jed's just got his number, to be honest with you. Yeah. Jed looked good. I think it's time to see Jed step up in competition and see what he can do against someone. The problem is he's a recent brown belt relatively. He was a purple belt, now he's a brown belt, and people are going, "Oh, we've got to find him a brown belt or whatever." No, you don't. Just find him a black belt to go against and give him a real test.
I mean, who would you put him against if you could put anyone? If you had to play matchmaker?
Well, you just said I think Taylor's a great match.
Yeah.
I think there'll be an interesting match against him. Yeah, I think any other up and coming under 80 kilo people is a good shout for Jed.
I mean, him and Ellis Younger have gone to war a few times, and they went to war again at the Empire Grappling Invitational. And Jed won that match on submission attempts. But I'm seeing on social media this morning that a promoter is putting on a sub-only, no time limit match, and Jed offered himself for that, and Ellis said he'd take it.
Okay.
And I would be really, really interested in that match because, Jed won on submission attempts. He had 2 good heel hook attempts at Empire Grappling. But Ellis looked phenomenal, as he always does, right? And I'd be really interested to see what happens in a no time limit match, because Jed is obviously a very explosive, very fast, very high paced grappler.
Yeah.
And I wonder what happens if you get to a 20-minute mark, for instance, a 30-minute mark. What happens then? Does Ellis take over with, his jiu-jitsu, or does Jed fight differently? Does he pace himself differently? I think that's a really interesting match.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always, even though a lot of the time I won't watch the whole thing because they can go on for hours, but I love the idea of having a sub-only match and you have a true winner there. So yeah, 100%. I hope that happens. Yeah,
me too. So I want to touch on lifting and strongman and why you do that stuff. And yeah, I mean, before I do that, I will give a shout out to the Bullingham Media Company, who are going to put out a little docuseries for you. And do you want to talk about that a little bit first? And
about Stones and Strangles?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
So we're almost halfway through. In fact, it's scheduled. The 4th episode is dropped on YouTube because I had. I thought I scheduled them for midday, but I think I accidentally scheduled it for midnight, or
right.
No, the beginning of the day today. But yeah, episode 4 is just coming out today. Basically what that was I was scheduled. I was doing a seminar tour of the north of England and Scotland, and I thought, whilst I'm going to Scotland, I did 5 seminars around Scotland, and whilst I'm up there, I want to go around and I want to lift as many, because I was really driving all the way around Scotland. So I did seminars in Glasgow, Aberdeen, Dundee, and Inverness. And I'm sure I did one more, but at least those 4. And that is literally the bottom, the side, the top of Scotland. So I'm thinking, I'm going to be driving all the way around Scotland. I might as well do some stone lifting whilst I'm at it, because it's something that I'm really interested in doing at the moment. So the plan came to do these seminars and go and lift some historic stones as well whilst I was doing them. And I was chatting to James, who I met on the Tenerife BJJ camp with Ben Poppleton.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that we were going to document it, because it was it was a pretty cool thing that I was doing. It was kind of unique, just a combination of the 2. And we thought that I'd get him to tag along and video it, and we'd make we didn't really know what it would be, whether it would be a 120-minute episode or whether it would be a couple of episodes, and it ended up being 8 episodes because we got, I can't explain how much, like when you'll watch all 8 episodes, and then we did that in 4 days, it was just insane. The pace that we were going, we were waking up at 8 in the morning every day, which is very early for me. We were waking up at 8 in the morning. It was 5 hours in the car every day. There was some days we were lifting 3 going to 3 different stone locations and then go into a seminar. So one day it was up in the morning, stone seminar. I think one day we did a stone, then I did a podcast, then I did 2 more stones, then I did a seminar. That was the next. I think the next 3 episodes, 5, 6, and 7 are all that one day. So the amount that we packed into 4 days was absolutely ludicrous. Even I remember I did a seminar on I think the Saturday. And then I did another, and then I drove around, did a load of stuff, did another seminar the next day on the Sunday or the Monday, or whatever it was, Sunday, Monday. And I saw someone who had been there the previous day. And I was like, oh man, I saw you a week ago. She's like, no, you saw me yesterday. That was how crazy it was. We did so much. So Stones and Strangles is the documentation of that trip for me. as we drove around and lifted stones and taught seminars. But it was a really cool trip, and I'm glad that we've got all the editing done. James at Bullingham Visual Media like absolutely smashed it. It's the first sort of vlogging thing that he's done. Not really. I think actually they call it a vlog is actually a to do it an injustice. It's a short. It's a
short documentary, right?
It's cinematic though.
Yeah, it is.
So we'll probably put it together as a close to feature length film by the end of it. It doesn't really read like a documentary. It reads very cinematic, but of course it is a documentary. But yeah, really fun to do that. I'm looking forward to going, be it back to Scotland or when I go one day to Iceland to attempt to lift. You know, and there's a few places, and stone lifting is getting more popular at the moment, and people are uncovering stones still, historic stones. Recently I saw something in Sweden that there's quite a bit of stone lifting history in Sweden. I know even in like places like Japan, they have stone lifting as part of their culture and history. So it sounds really weird, but so many places, everyone had it at one point, you know, before we had other weights, people were just lifting stones. But a lot of places still have that niche little stone lifting culture.
Yeah, and I mean, the first thing is how fucking beautiful is Scotland, right?
Oh, beautiful. Scotland is incredible. It's one of my favorite places in the world, Scotland is. I love Scotland.
Yeah, it's so nice. And I think the culture and the way that people are, especially up in the Highlands, is just different. It's very, very different to what you get in, I don't know, Mill Hill or fucking central London or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, why stones? Like why stone lifting? Why powerlifting? Why strongman stuff?
You know, who doesn't want to be strong, right?
Sure.
So you know that strength is never a weakness. And strength, I got into strength through jiu-jitsu originally. I was never really lifting before I started jiu-jitsu. And then I started doing a little bit of conditioning as part of jiu-jitsu, but not really strength training, but conditioning. Then I read a book called Dinosaur Training. I got into strength lifting, lifting for strength training with the focus on sort of the old time strongmen and stuff like that. That was the whole sort of the premise behind Dinosaur Training. The dinosaurs being the old school strongmen that could still hang. And that kind of set me on the path of exploration in that field. In terms of stone lifting, that's a journey that's a couple of years old for me at this point. I started to get bored of doing barbell stuff. I was training at a gym that we did a lot of barbell stuff, and then a lot of the people that I was training with started competing in strongman competitions. I never competed in strongman, but I would train with them. So we started doing a lot more atlas stones, yoke, farmers, log press, stuff like that. And then a couple of years ago, a good friend of mine who makes kind of the main grip guy in the UK, a guy called David Horn, he released Dinny Stone training handles. And because I buy everything that David Horn makes, I was like, okay, send me some. And that started me on the journey to lift the Dinny stones, which was something that I didn't think I'd ever be able to do because of the back injury that I'd had in the past. But as I started to train with the Dinny stones, my back seemed to get stronger. And in the end, I ended up training for and achieving the goal of lifting the real Dinny stones in Scotland of August last year. And then
how much do they weigh?
There's two stones. They're 333.5 kilos altogether.
Fuck.
It's 188 something and 144. They have ring handles, and you kind of straddle over the top of them and lift them both off the ground at the same time.
Yeah, if anyone hasn't seen that, it's on your Instagram, right? I've seen it. I've definitely seen some footage of you doing it.
Yes, it's on my Instagram. Yes,
yeah.
It's on my Instagram.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I lifted the Dinny stones in there, and I was like, man, my back feels good. I started doing more training with sandbags, and then learning the history of stone lifting and wanting to be part of it. Like, it's an unbelievable. I've had this conversation with a lot of people, full stop, because I'm doing it so much at the moment. And be it in podcast, be it in real life, and then obviously with Stones and Strangles, more people are asking me about that as well. It is an unbelievable feeling to be part of the history of a stone. You know, it is not the same as just lifting a stone. Sure. I could walk down the street and find a boulder on the side of the road and lift it up. That's just lifting. Okay. That's just a test of your strength. But to learn about a stone, to read, and there's some people out there who have just done an incredible job of documenting the history behind some of these stones. And some of them are testing stones from clans from hundreds of years ago. Some are stones that were lifted. You know, I think episode 2, we went to a lifting site that was the site of basically a party where all of the clans got together in the 1715 Jacobite rebellion, the Jacobite rising against the Scots against the English. And all of the Scottish clans met up and they drank. And when people drink back in the day, like stone lifting was a thing. So people would drink and then one clan member would go, oh, I could lift that stone. I bet you can't. And he'd lift that stone and he'd lift that stone. So, you know, then you go to the area and you go, man, this is where they stood. This is the stone that they lifted. And there's something about, you know, so some of the stones are kept. So like the Dinnies, for example, they're kept outside of a hotel or like a restaurant and / hotel that's there. The Inver stone, which was the last episode, is kept outside of a lady's front. Is kept outside a house in a front garden. Fortunately, she actually passed away a couple of weeks ago, so I felt very privileged to go and lift the stone and speak to her and see her again earlier in the year before she passed. So those are cool. But when you go into the woods, or you go into a forest, or you climb out into a field to find this stone just laying there, and you can almost see its aura coming off of it as you approach it. That is to see something, you almost get starstruck by a piece of rock, you know? Like I've read about this stone, but I've never lifted it before. I've never seen it in person. And then you go up to it, you put your hands on it, you feel it, and then you actually get all psyched up and you lift it up. And then as soon as you lift it up, you're now part of that history.
Of course.
Forever. Can't be taken from it.
That's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah, it's awesome,
like,
man. It's cool.
There's just something about the reverie of and the notion of belonging, the notion of tribe, and that's kind of where it is. And there's like it's like a very niche tribe of
it's very niche,
people you know, seeking out big lumps of rock that are incredibly heavy, and then being like, I can lift that, mate.
Yeah.
And then doing it, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just and it's actually not dissimilar to jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
Which is the more you put into it, the more you get out.
Sure.
Right? So if you rock up at the gym once every couple of weeks, you're not really paying attention during the techniques, and you have a bit of a scrap at the end, you're not going to get much out of jiu-jitsu. But if you come 3 times a week, every week, you're learning the techniques. You're asking the instructor for tips. You're watching videos when you get home. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And it's the same for the stones. The more you learn about it, the more you research, the more you understand it, the more you get part of that community, the more lifting the stone means. And it's hard to understand that until in the same way that it's hard to understand the beauty and complexity and the art of jiu-jitsu from the outside.
And do you think that it's because lifting a stone in literally a natural environment is more intrinsic to our human self than going into a gym where it's air conditioned and there's people in Gymshark leggings and you know you're lifting up a barbell or a bench press, or you know you're squatting with a rack or whatever? Do you think that there's something that's just a bit more human about doing that, and that sort of brings, because there's something like you talked about hunting, right? And I can only imagine that being out in nature for a couple of days, potentially stalking the prey, shooting the prey, and then preparing that, like there would be something that would awaken in you, something that would be like, oh fuck, like my ancestors have done this thousands of years ago or hundreds of thousands of years ago. And do you think that, as you say, like you've delved into the history of stone lifting, and you've understood, and you're respecting, and you're being authentic in your approach to that tradition, essentially?
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. I do think that hunting is part of our makeup. I think that's deep inside, and it's something we've lost a lot. I think stone lifting as well. You know, there would have been a time where there were no barbells, there were no gyms, there were no treadmills. if you wanted to lift something heavy, it was a stone or it was a log or something. It's just something you could find. People didn't make stuff. And then, of course, people did start to make stuff. And then we continued to evolve that technology to this day. I think there's something about exercising outside in nature, which is powerful, and it gives you a connection with nature, which I think is lost from so many people. These places that I visited on my stone tour are places that I never would have even known about if I didn't have coordinates on a GPS for a specific stone that I never would have gone to. But you end up in these incredible locations, really beautiful locations. Go in there with purpose as well to go and do stuff. In terms of comparing that to what you do in the gym. Now, I don't want to ever talk bad about barbells, about dumbbells, because everything is just a tool.
Yes.
You know? But the difference between a barbell and a stone and a lot of other stuff that I do. So stuff that I've done in the past, you could say stone lifting's my thing right now. And a couple of years ago, it was card tearing. And a few years before that, it was nail bending and horseshoe bending. All of these things share one similarity, which is the antagonist, the opposite of going to a gym and lifting barbells or machines and stuff like that, which is a barbell is made to be lifted.
Yeah.
Right. A dumbbell is made to be lifted. A kettlebell is made to be lifted. A hammer strength machine is made to be lifted. A stone is not made, yet alone made to be lifted. A sandbag is not made to be lifted, even though it is made, and it is made to be lifted, but it's not. It's just a container of sand. A nail is not made to be bent. It's made to be strong. A deck of cards is not made to be torn. It's made to be strong again. So there's something, whenever I have people lift stones or lift sandbags or bend nails or horseshoes or tear cards, there is an unbelievable feeling of overcoming the design of what you're doing or the implement that you're doing. You're defeating something that is not meant to be handled or defeated in that way. And it feels awesome. People feel good after it. People bend a piece. Man, the first time I bent a piece of steel, Jesus Christ. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago. The first time I got this steel, this 6-inch nail, I wrapped it up and it just in my kitchen, no technique, just bending this thing. And when I felt it move in my hands, it's like a huge rush of energy, an unbelievable feeling to feel something that is designed to be strong and unwielding, and for you to be able to defeat that thing and manipulate it in your hands with your power is crazy.
And there's a really deep psychological and philosophical notion to that, right? There's such a deep reward to that. A reward that more than you can just say, right? Like
it's almost it's quite rebellious.
Yeah, of course. But it's like, it's conquering, it's dominating, but it's dominating in a way that's not necessarily outwardly aggressive or violent, or unless we find out in 10 years that a nail is a sentient being and we have to have this, we have to have this discussion, but I doubt
I hope not.
Yeah,
I would be called a murderer big time.
Yeah. But yeah, like I think that there's also something, as you're saying, there's unconventional lifting, unconventional strength. And I think that ties really well into jiu-jitsu specifically, because you can have big, strong gym guys that go to the gym and they get big, but then when you put them in certain positions, they don't have the strength in the dexterous movements. They don't have strength in the awkward, weird, crumpled up positions that you can be in jiu-jitsu. And this may sound weird, but one of my coaches, Tommy Yip, he walks around at like 62, 63 kilos, maybe after some fried chicken, 64. But, like he's so strong in weird positions.
Yes.
And it's just, that dexterity, that strength, that unconventional knowledge. And, as you've said, like it must be such a cerebral challenge when you look at a stone and you're staring down at this fucking massive, nearly 200 kilo stone. And you're like, right, where do I even start? right? And
Yeah.
you're feeling the stone, you're touching it, you're working out the grooves, you're working out the hand positions, you're working out where you need to place your weight, your strength, your base. You're looking at it as an opponent, as a challenge, as a puzzle. And you as you're gripping it, you could also think like, what did the guys 1500 years ago do to grip this stone? How did they look? What did they do? And as you're saying, you're soaking both in and soaking out the effort, the energy, the will, the want, and then obviously your strength to then lift that thing.
Yeah.
That, I think, is so, there's something to that that's so deeply psychologically rewarding. I talk, the way that this kind of pricks in my mind as you've been talking is, there's a guy called Sebastian Junger, and he wrote a book called Tribe.
Do you know that I've had Sebastian Junger on my podcast?
Have you really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Do you know what, mate? I'll tell you something. Just firstly, everything you said before is spot on. It's absolutely a puzzle. You're absolutely spot on. But I got to stop you there. So, funnily enough, Sebastian Junger, who wrote, as you were going to say, wrote an incredible book called Tribe.
Yep.
I read Tribe a couple of times, and I was talking about it on my podcast one day and saying how it's such a great book. And one of the listeners of the podcast got into contact with Sebastian Junger, and they ended up chatting, and he said he was coming to the UK, and she said, would you want to do a podcast with me? And he said yes. And I'm thinking, this is unbelievable.
Oh my God,
now,
you're fucking famous.
I had the incredible pleasure, because I first heard Sebastian on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and then I listened to him on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
And I had him on my podcast. And he is one of my least listened to episodes.
I'm not surprised.
Because nobody knows, no one in the jiu-jitsu community, but people don't understand. This guy is the biggest name that I've had on the show. Yeah. But yeah, an incredible guy, very, very nice guy, very smart, awesome guy. I'm a huge fan of Sebastian Junger. But yeah, just since you mentioned that name, I had to tell you.
I mean,
carry on anyway.
I mean, fuck what I was about to say. Like, what was that? For people that haven't listened to that podcast, first of all, go and fucking listen to it.
Yeah.
But I imagine, the book Tribe, as the very brief synopsis, is basically Sebastian followed some soldiers and what it was like for them in battle, and then what it was like for them outside of battle. And the thing that struck me the most is a lot of those guys miss the camaraderie and miss not necessarily the battle and the death and everything that comes with it, but more just the intense relationship with another thing. And that other thing happened to be their squad, right? But you are building an intense relationship with, at that time, an inanimate object. But it's not really inanimate. And it's not inanimate because that stone has lived through so much stuff. It's been around so much stuff. So many people have put years of trial and effort and blood and sweat into lifting these things or becoming one with these things. And yeah, I think that holds something that we just don't have now. Like a hunt in 21st century is eBay surfing. It's fighting for the last orange in the Asda counter. It's, winning something or seeing something is 15% cheaper on Amazon than it is in somewhere else and like getting it. It's waiting for the new drop of show your old fucking geese and managing to get your hands on one. Like that's the hunt now. And it's just useless essentially in comparison.
Yeah, I think you're touching on a lot of very interesting, very deep and very psychological and philosophical topics there. Like you said, I think you're absolutely right. I never thought of, I'm still not sure. I'm still, because you said, in the same way that Sebastian was saying about how these guys missed the front line, being in Afghanistan, being in some of the harshest locations. I've had quite a few military guys on my podcast.
Yeah.
And you can include, have you seen Restrepo? His film?
I've not seen Restrepo, but
bro, watch Restrepo. I think it's on Netflix.
Okay, all right.
I think it might be on Netflix. Watch Restrepo. If you can pretty much include Sebastian as, even though he wasn't military, he was a journalist. He was there. He was there on the front line. He was basically part of it. And I've had guys. I had a guy on my podcast who lost his, went blind from an IED. I've had a lot of military guys, and every single one of them off air, okay, or pretty much I'll say not every one of them, and then you'll have to think between it. But pretty much all of them, they said if they had the opportunity, they'd be back like that to the front line. To the even Rob, who was blinded by an ID, horrible experience, horrible life-changing experience. He said if he could go back and do it again, he'd be there. And that's crazy. Like and I think that us in our modern society, we have no idea what it's like to live in that sort of situation, which is how we are meant to live. If you read Tribe, that's how we're meant to live. We just don't know what we're missing because we've never had it. You know, and this is one of the big things that he said about the crazy stat from Tribe, of course, is that I can't even remember what it was, but like the majority of people who suffer from PTSD from ex-military never saw action, never got shot at, never saw anyone die. They're not missing. That people assume PTSD is when you see your buddy get shot, and of course that can happen.
Of course,
The majority of PTSD sufferers are people who just miss the camaraderie and the tribe that they had when they were in war. And I think that's just something that we all miss, but we just don't understand that we miss it. And then you have someone who goes into the military and they see this other side of life, the joy of it, and then they have that taken away from them. But I never thought that about connecting with these stones. I don't know if it is a connection with the stones, but it might be, or whether by lifting that stone you are now connected to that other community.
I mean, when you were discussing, you seemed way more animated and interested in the history behind the stone than you did when you were just like, you spent about 45 seconds giving context to lifting the stone, and then you're like, and then I went to the house and lifted it.
But that's what it's like, because that's the reality, that the history, the stone's just a stone.
Of course.
It doesn't matter. This is my point. Just a stone, but like a person's just a person. It's the history. It's the story.
Right.
I had a conversation with, I did a podcast about a month ago, and we were talking about even like the equipment that I'm having made, So like I had the sword handle, Caliburn, okay? The sword handle, which was meant to be like a sword in the stone or a sword in the anvil, whichever version. And for me, it was the story behind the creation. That it's just a vertical lift. But because the story has gone into the creation of that, it means a lot more. When I swing, I got this big, the last one, I got this big mace, which was my interpretation of a replication of Great Gamma's mace. It's just a big stick. But for me, it's the story that goes behind that. That is a replica of the Great Gamma's mace, or that was the inspiration behind it. It's narrative and story that gives everything in life a meaning. It's what gives you a meaning. It's what gives me a meaning. It's what gives everything a meaning. If you don't have any story, if there's no history there, then everything is very superficial and it doesn't matter.
And I think there's probably one word that takes that whole thing a little bit deeper, and it is the story, but it's the connection that the story allows, right?
That's it. Yeah.
It's the links. It's the connection. If we think about history as a chain, then by creating a Gamma mace, or by having an Arthur anvil, or by traveling the UK to lift up stones, you're adding to the chain of humanity. You're adding to the chain of history. And that is something that there's this weird, how do I describe it without sounding like a hippie? Like there seems to be a connection that lives, right? And it lives through stories, and you can almost feel as if you're part of something that doesn't exist anymore, sort of tangibly, but it exists through something that is in the ether, something that is in the story, something that is in the poem, something that's in the myths and the legends, and then you go to that place, and you said I jumped into a field and I felt the aura of the stone, right? Have you ever been to St. Paul's Cathedral in and have you been to the Basilica in Rome? Like when I walked into the courtyard of the Basilica, I was like, "Ooh, this feels different." And then you walk into the Basilica and you're like, "Fuck me, some shit's happened here." Like you can feel it, and you don't feel that when you go to Asda.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
feel that
totally.
when you go to Tesco, right?
Mm.
There is
Mm.
something to these specific monuments. Like I was fortunate enough to go to the pyramids in Egypt, right?
Wow, nice. Yeah.
And what's so strange about that experience is you see all these amazing shots, right? It's not like that.
Mm.
The shots that you see are great, but behind you is one of the biggest shanty towns in Egypt.
Mm.
And it doesn't feel the same. But
Really?
then, no, it doesn't feel the same. And it also doesn't feel the same because those things are now tourist attractions, really.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
and they are really, really tourist attractions.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel as natural as it did. But we were then fortunate enough to go inside one and climb into the
Wow.
chamber, right?
Wow.
Now, not only is that the hottest thing I've ever been inside,
Really?
yeah. So the Egypt itself outside on that day was 49 degrees,
Wow.
and
You'd think
inside,
under all of that, under all of that rock, it would be cool, right?
but there's holes in it, right?
Okay.
And there's holes in it that allow air in and out.
Yeah.
No cool air, zero, zilch,
Wow.
nothing. Inside it was like 61 or something. It was
Jesus
so
Christ.
hot. And you climb and you're climbing on your hands and knees, like crawling up. And then you get to like a staircase and you walk up the staircase and then you get into the tomb, essentially. One of them, obviously you can't go into all of them. But then it was like, oh, okay.
Mm.
Like, this is weird. Like, this is old. You can feel something here. There's a connection here. Now, of course, I didn't lift any rocks. Otherwise, I probably would have been shot. But, you know, like, there's something to these
Yeah.
places. And, of course, you know, a stone in Venice may not hold the grandiose glamour of something like the pyramids of Giza or whatever. But again, we're talking about something that is shared, and that shared thing is story, it's myth, it's legend, it's history, it's connection, right?
Mm.
And that's something that I think is really vastly missing in
Yes.
life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and there's so many. I do think that what you said about tourist attractions, they do kill it. You know, I was lucky enough through Quintet to go to Japan,
Oh my
and you go
God.
and visit some castles and
Yeah.
temples and, you know, old samurai, you know, unbelievable buildings. But it felt almost like I was in Disneyland. There were so many people there, and I think that is also one of the nice things about going and doing the stone lifting. There's nobody there. There's
It's just you.
nobody there. Like you know, there's some of these places, there's no cars passing. It is absolutely in the wilderness somewhere. So it makes it feel special because you feel like it's almost at that moment in time, you did not share that with anyone else. But yeah, you know, I was reading a book recently about Paleolithic artwork in some of the caves in Spain and France, like, and stuff like that, and how I'd love to get out there and go inside. They said going inside of these are just unbelievable. You can look at the artwork made by our ancestors 30,000 years ago. You know,
Mhm.
just mind blowing stuff.
Yeah, man. And I think that there is something that now, you know, like I work in IT and it's my job to know about, you know, technology and all that kind of shit. But like, there is something that I can feel is changing in what it
Mm.
is to be human. Like, from what my mother was as a child to
Mm.
what I am now and what my nephew at 4 is. Like, I was talking to this with my partner the other day, and like my little nephew is 4, right? He can't speak in complex sentences yet. He can't write his name in joined up handwriting, but
You can
if
smash Fortnite.
but he can play games.
Yeah.
He can get his mom's phone and he can unlock the phone. He can go to the app store. He can buy an app. He can download it. He can play that app. He can navigate his way to the phone. He's got this weird thing where he's watching cartoons in Russian, right?
Okay.
So he decided he wanted to put the language, the keyboard in my sister's phone as Russian. So he
And
unlocked the
he could
phone
do it. Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
do it, right?
Wow.
They got him like a little gaming tablet type thing for his birthday, and they just gave it to him. He set it all up himself.
Wow.
Everything was all his own. Everything is himself. And it's like that's weird, right?
Mm.
Like, what it is to be human is changing. And yet
Yeah.
then you talk about these experiences that you go on alone. And I think that's really important, is that you do it alone and you do it for yourself, and you don't do it for the glamour or the glory other than for your own glamour and glory, right?
Yeah.
It's like reticent within yourself and with nobody else. And then you go and you unlock, it's like unlocking different XP points, if we're going to talk about it in game terms.
Yeah.
It's like you go on a secret quest and you've stumbled across this thing.
Yeah, the side missions. Yeah,
the side mission, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you're wandering through Skyrim and you find something like, that looks cool. What's that?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you unlock this channel of newness, but newness that's 2,000 years old or 5,000 years old or 10,000 years old. And I think that makes us a richer character. And one of the reasons why I'm starting this podcast is essentially to do this kind of stuff, right? Where we could have had a conversation over Instagram and it wouldn't have been half as enriching as some of the topics that we've covered already.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And something that I really feel is missing and is going to be missing in the next sort of generations is this. Like, if anyone follows Jude Samuel on Instagram, right, you will know that guy is the meme master, right?
Yeah.
His story every day has at least 10 or 15 different memes that are all hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that guy knows how to talk. That guy knows how to conversate, and he sees the intelligence in what's being portrayed in a meme. But those memes are so full of information, but it's just a still picture. It's just a 2D image.
Yeah.
But I think that we appreciate those things because we know what's behind them. We know the complexity of what's behind them. Whereas people like that are just being introduced to memes and don't know the idea of long form conversation, I wonder whether the same impact will happen. I don't know.
Yeah, like you're talking about some very interesting things, which is the rate of technological advance vastly, it has for many years, but at this point even more so, vastly supersedes our ability to adapt physiologically, certainly psychologically, who knows. Are we losing touch of what it means to be human, or is evolution just part social and cultural evolution just part of natural evolution as it is? Who knows? But I think there's a lot of people out there who are trying to and I don't know whether it could be that there is an increasing number of people who are trying to reconnect with what it is to be a human in a more ancestral and ancient way.
Yep.
But the question is that being superseded by a even faster increase in the population of people who have no interest and who are becoming more disconnected from what it means to be human? I think that it is worth for everyone to be very critical of themselves and how they view the world, and not getting sucked into what could be too easy. I think that's one of the biggest problems about modern society, is that it's very easy. Everything is made easy for you. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy one-click buying on Amazon and getting it the next day as much as the next guy. But you cannot wish for an easy life. It's why I like to lift things. It's like why I like to challenge myself. It's why I like to fight people. Everything. All of these things they're not easy. None of them are. You have to train to. Sometimes you'll lose. I've picked up a big sandbag and I've gone down. I haven't come back up before. Or I've tried to take someone down and they sprawled on me and my face is smashed into the ground. These things happen. And I think the trouble is when everything becomes so easy that you could be able to live your life with minimal struggle, and that is not true to humans. We, in the same way that if you when a caterpillar goes into a cocoon before it becomes a butterfly, it fighting its way out of the cocoon is what builds its strength to be able to live afterwards. If you were to cut it out of the cocoon to make it easy, it would then not have the strength to actually live. And I think it's a great analogy for some people trying to make stuff too easy. The video games are easy. What's sitting in front of the TV is easy. Getting junk food is easy. And we live in a society that perpetuates our ability to do that. I think it's important for us not to do that, and to get outside and, you know, feel cold on your body, and be hot sometimes, be cold sometimes, be out of breath sometimes, hurt yourself sometimes, in order to really experience the full human experience.
Yeah, and I think I want to pose a question and see what your opinion is. Like, do you think you mentioned there that it's not true to the human form? Truth is a variable, as we know.
Yeah.
But is it that the ease of human life is the next evolution, and is it that AI and everything else is just the next step in what it is to be human? In the same vein that our ancestors would be like, you don't need a phone, just write to your mates, just go and knock on their door. Like, if you want to organize something, just organize it. Like, you don't need to text them. You know, is it that we are holding on to the embers of what was and just not accepting what will be next in the evolutionary step? Or do you think that the introduction of technology is that we've brought apart something that we don't understand the power of?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely, you know, I want to talk about an easy life. That I'm not trying to say that everyone has an easy life. Everyone has struggles in their life. Everyone has issues in their life, be it illness or be it family struggles or financial or anything. Everyone has issues in some way or in another. It's just, do you actively seek out challenges? Do you seek out difficulty, or do you look to kind of cocoon yourself in safety? I think that's the real question. In terms of technology, you know, who knows with technology? Yes, you could absolutely be right. We're just moaning. We're in 30 years time when we're talking to our grandkids going, oh, back in my day, you couldn't just click your fingers and fly to wherever you wanted to go. And, you know, are we just being dinosaurs? But I think it's a natural reaction for us to feel like when our grandparents would they write to them instead of text messaging them, we go, writing is that's years ago. We don't do that anymore. We text people now. But actually now I'm a little bit older, and you think about it, man, how lovely would it be to receive a handwritten letter, you know? So in some way, I think it's a natural reaction for us to hear about the past and say, we've evolved. We're past that now. There's stuff that you can take, and you want to be careful not to fly past everything that happened before us straight to what's happening on the precipice of technology and human social evolution. I think as a combination, you know, have AI, have an incredible computer, have a mobile phone more powerful than the spaceship that went to the moon, but also go out, like leave your phone at home one day, go out into the woods, you know, look up at the trees and smell the air and swim in a lake and do these other things. I think there's like with everything in life. What's the name of this podcast again?
All about balance.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's all about balance. When it comes to technology and human evolution, it's about balance. There's stuff that we can learn from the past, and there's stuff that we can learn from the future. And living in a off-grid shack that you've made out of trees, and you know you don't have electricity, and you just forage berries to sustain yourself. That's probably not the best way to do it. But living and only ever talking to people online and never getting outside and never seeing the beauty of nature is also probably not the way to do it. The reality, as with most things, probably lies somewhere in the middle.
100%. And that's, you know, one of my only philosophical rules is to always try and find the middle, because most answers are in the middle.
It's all about balance.
Yeah, I fucking hate them. What's so strange is like the idea for the name behind this podcast.
I love it. I love it.
It comes from Carl Jung, right? So Carl Jung talks a lot about finding the middle road, the middle lane,
absolutely,
balance, right? So yeah, I mean, in a conversation one time, I was like, yeah, but it's just all about balance, and I was like, oh fuck, that's the name. Like that's the name.
I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, But yeah, you're right. You are right. I think balance is imperative, and balance and symmetry and everything is so intrinsic to a lot of the teachings that we've got. Like if you look at the yin and yang symbol, the yin and yang symbol is balance. If you look at most symbols that we have, there is some symmetry, or there's some, balance to that. There's all the teaching we have, whether it's biblical teaching, whether it's Hindu teaching, whether it's Islamic teaching, whether it's Maoist teaching, whether it's, whatever, Taoist, anything. Like a lot of it is dealt around the notions of balance.
Yeah.
And you're right that there's something that's so pure about just not taking your phone somewhere.
Yeah.
And not constantly checking Instagram or Twitter or your WhatsApp or whatever, but instead going out and just being. Or
and to be clear, like, I have that issue. I am on my phone way too much, and I have to make a very conscious effort. I have to work hard. Like, that's how I challenge myself. Like, get off your phone. Leave it in your bedroom today. Go downstairs. Don't go outside and read a book. Don't take your phone and put it face down next to you. Just don't bring it.
It's too easy.
And that's a constant challenge that I have. And but that's kind of, that's one of the things that I'm talking about. Finding that balance, and if you don't already possess it, it's always going to be a struggle, because you have to fight past some things that you will instinctively fight against. But that's part of the challenge. That's not making life easy for yourself.
And was the podcast a challenge for you? Was that something you did to challenge yourself?
No, the podcast was a seed that I planted and allowed it to flourish as it wanted to. The podcast has never been a challenge for me. It's always been really enjoyable, and I feel privileged to be able to make it, and privileged to speak to the people that I've spoken.
Tell me about it.
For me, that was just, it was very simple, which was I started listening to some podcasts. I was never big in the podcast, and I started listening to a few, and I thought I'd really love a podcast that resonated for me. What podcast would I want to hear? I want to hear a podcast about jiu-jitsu in the UK, or in jiu-jitsu full stop. So I went and had a look, and there really wasn't any good ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, I'll start my own one. And that was it. It was just getting people in that I knew. And then as it got bigger, I was able to reach out further. And I'm 85, 86 episodes in, and I've spoken to some people.
Incredible names.
Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah.
And once this pandemic's done, I've got a lot of really cool people lined up afterwards as well.
Yeah, man, it's going to be good. And I think the one thing I did want to say publicly is that actually yourself was one of the motivations for this, because for a long time I wasn't able to put together an understanding of what exactly I needed to make a podcast. And on one of your Q&As on Instagram, somebody asked you, like, what shit do you use? And you listed all the stuff that you used, and I had that screenshot saved in my phone.
There, you got the Rode Procaster. You've got the Procaster stand, same as me. You got the PSA 1 Scarlet Focus. Right, you're banging it, mate. And you beat me on one thing though. You got a badass studio behind you. Cool pictures on the walls. Big sofas in the back there. Very, very cool setup. Well done.
Thank you. But yeah, like, if it wasn't for, the term, just to kind of link it back to what we were saying about stones and stuff, like, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right?
Mm.
And if it wasn't, I mean, look, I am sure that eventually I would have been able to piece together a kit list and buy some shit and put a podcast out. Yeah. But there's somebody that was way more experienced than me that had probably got his purple belt in podcasting already, nearing onto his brown belt. And then, I was like, oh, cool. I'm like a shit 1-day white belt. And that guy has just offered me a free stripe. Like, I'm going to take that stripe and I'm going to run with it. And here we are. And now I'm at a point where I'm doing YouTube stuff. I do all the editing myself. The only thing I don't do is the hosting. And I'm looking into, transcription services. I'm looking into how I'm going to do video snippets and all of this kind of stuff. Like, somebody allowing and somebody giving you that spark, that initial leg up, that initial step is is bountiful, right? It's really, really bountiful. So for that, I just wanted to, for having that Q&A and asking that question, I just wanted to say thank you, because
that's my absolute pleasure, man. And it means a lot to hear that. I have to say for you, one, I'm gonna, I've been meaning to do like a video about my setup and a few other things that I do as well. So, but for you, I have helped, I would say that I have spoken to upwards of 40 to 50 different people who have asked me about how to set up a podcast.
Yeah.
Tell them I use this, I use this, I use this, I use this, I use this. And do you know how many actually listen to me and do it?
A couple of percent, surely, not many.
I can't even think of one. I can't think of one that got the setup I told them.
Yeah.
But here we are with someone who didn't even ask me, which you could have done, of course.
Yeah.
If anyone does want to ask me, they can ask me. But you just saw what I put out, and boom, you've got the setup. You've got exactly the same setup that I'm using here, the exact same setup that I use for all of my podcasts. So there's one thing to put the information out, and there's the other thing to listen and take it on board, and you've done that. So props to you as well.
I mean, thank you. Like, just again, like I have an episode, I think it's episode 3, where I sit and I talk for about 15 minutes about what the point of this podcast is. But just to reiterate, like, I wanted to do something to promote long form conversation, as I've said already. And I wanted to do something like, this is in no means sexist or anything, but I think that something that doesn't happen enough is long form conversation between men. And I think long form conversation between men that has some emotional depth to it and has some philosophical and ethical backing to it. I think a lot of guys can shoot the shit about sports or, you know, whatever, you name it, in the same vein that females can shoot the shit about, I don't know, whatever they talk about. But I think that there is something distinctly lacking between males, and I'm very fortunate that in my friendship group it's not really like that, but where there's a stigma behind males talking about things that actually concern them. And you know, I think it's different for guys like yourself that have some life experience and also have the confidence to just say whatever they think that they mean, right? And whatever happens in the ether happens in the ether. But yeah, like I think that this was supposed to be a platform for long form conversation in any facet that we could get it. Not specifically for males, but that was something, that was one of the motivations I had for making it. And, you know, when you see people that you respect put information out, it's stupid not to take notice of that.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, when you did put out that, I was like, okay, like, you know, I researched what does Joe Rogan use, right? He uses a 600-pound mic, has 4 of them. He uses a boom arm that's nearly 1,000
he uses
pounds.
the Shure, is it the
7MB, SMB 7.
Yeah, 7MB. That's what one day.
What? Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, no, I don't have that kind of money. And then, you know, I looked at the setup that Jamie, his producer, uses, and it's like, you know, totaling, you're looking at probably about 25 grand for his setup. I don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of money. And then, you know, like, full disclosure.
It's the biggest podcast in the world.
Yeah, of course. Like, your setup, the Focusrite was about 150 quid. The mic was about 150 quid, 160 quid. The boom arm was about 80 pounds. And that's basically all you need, right? I just plug everything else into my computer and I record everything through my computer. And, you know, the only thing that I've now switched up is I bought a webcam, right? And that's it, right? Like, that's the podcast. And okay, for an investment of maybe £600, now I have been able to achieve a podcast, right? Something that goes out weekly, that I, you know, I've now got guests, and this is not me blowing my own horn or anything, but I've now got guests booked weekly up until, you know, the 7th of September. And it's sprouting into something. Like, I don't know whether this is something that you've noticed, but numbers during coronavirus have been a lot lower than outside of coronavirus.
Yeah, but people are just people
not listening to podcasts.
They're not doing their usual stuff. They're not going to work. They're not getting the train.
Yeah, of course. And you know, I'm still thankful that, you know, Bradley Hill's episode got 70, 80 listens. And in coronavirus time, like, that's not a bad listen. That's not a bad listenership. You know, bearing in mind, I'm just some random guy in South London that doesn't really have a name at all. And yet 70 people will want to listen to my podcast with Bradley about, I mean, of course they want to listen to Bradley, let's not get that twisted, but they will listen to my platform where Bradley was gracious enough to give me his time, and they're happy to do that for, I mean, the podcast is like 2 hours, right? And somebody's happy to sit through and listen to 2 hours of me and Bradley talking shit. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, mate. You're doing the right thing, and I've really enjoyed the chat. You know, I do a lot of these, and we definitely got onto some topics. I've got deeper into some topics than I have with most people.
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? I think it's because look, it's very easy to come on here and be like, okay, Dan has been to ADCC. He's a black belt. He does jiu-jitsu loads. He's also some fucking monstrous jacked gorilla type dude that lifts things up and puts them back down again, right? Let's just talk about that. And yeah, that's cool, but that's been done before, right? Like
Yes.
I don't mean to say I don't care about that stuff, because that's
You're absolutely
disrespectful.
right. That's it. It's been done before. You're right.
If I want to listen to you talk about that stuff, I can listen to it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you know, I care about who you are as a person outside of jiu-jitsu, outside of the strongman. Like, why do you do this stuff? What drives you to do that stuff? So that's the stuff that interests me. But look, I mean, I understand that I've taken nearly an hour and a half of your time. So
no, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So I'll look to round up, and I think the last question that I think people will be interested in is, and that's the other thing. Like, I didn't mean for this to be an interview, and I don't like doing interviews. I prefer just doing chats. But what's 2021 for you? Because essentially 2020 is pretty much dead now. Like, there's not much left that we can do.
And so many people have asked this question, and how's our connection? Is it still stable?
It's grand, mate. You've been fucking grand the whole time through.
Perfect. 2021, man, who knows? What a crazy time. It's a crazy time to be doing jiu-jitsu, that's for sure. For me, it's given me a push to get some of the online stuff that I've been planning and the peripherals for many years out there. In terms of what 2021 holds, I have no idea. If there was full freedom and I could train and travel and teach and all of that stuff, then that's what I'd be doing. Who knows what we'll be doing in 6 months' time? I think it's the next 6 months are going to be really interesting. But yeah, I've got a few projects that I want to get out, and just So the thing that I'm working on at the moment is just like a grip training for grappling instructional. Which I want to get finalized and recorded and released. And
beautiful.
You know, I get questions. So I get questions every day asking, where do I start? How do I start grip training? I've got a few videos on my YouTube, but I want to really spend some time to create a all-in-one package of this is all the. I want to try and get as much knowledge as I can from years of training and grappling together, and put it into one package and get that out to people. So that's the main focus for me at the moment. Hopefully that will be out in the next couple of months.
Good. Sounds good. I mean, I think the more instructionals that high level people put out, the better. And, you know, not even necessarily high level. Like, I just think if you've been strength training now for a long time, like if anyone remembers Dan when he was like a blue belt, he didn't look like this. He did not look like this at all.
I've got a cool video I'm dropping in. I'll be dropping like tomorrow or the next day or something about. It's like a side by side of me doing pull-ups 10 years ago and me doing pull-ups last week.
Yeah, it's going to be different. It's going to be very different. Was that weird to see?
It's one of those things where because I'm there, it's like you don't really notice your dog growing up because you're there every day. But you look back and I look back. I don't know if it's the same for everyone else, but I look back at myself 10 years ago and I don't recognize that individual as myself. I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but
16-year-old me is a fucking crackhead. Like, Jesus, 16-year-old me would have been an absolute nut job. The one thing I did want to touch on, if you've got the time, is
of course,
traveling, right? Like, traveling is something that I think a lot of people say that they will do, but then never actually do. Like, why traveling? What does traveling do for you?
I have never liked traveling.
Interesting.
I've never been big into traveling, and there was a period of about 7 or 8 years where I never went on holiday apart from to do jiu-jitsu. I'd go to compete, I'd go to teach, and that would be it. And you can pick up some of the other stuff, on the way. And I kind of forced myself to see a bit of the world before I settled down and, I opened a gym and be really glued to a single location geographically a little bit more. But traveling, there's a difference between traveling and going on holiday. And I think that was for me, I didn't like just going on holiday and just going to another country to sit around. When you go around and you actually, like I went to Australia and I traveled to 10 different cities in Australia over 6 weeks and saw stuff and did stuff and trained. You know, for me, honestly, because, and I don't know whether that's just because I love jiu-jitsu so much, but for me, when I travel, not jiu-jitsu, but like grappling in general, my idea of traveling is traveling with purpose to learn about, you know, be it stone lifting, be it jiu-jitsu, be it grappling, be it stuff similar to that, be it mythology. I'm big into Greek and Roman mythology and stuff like that, and the pantheon, Greek and Roman pantheon. So like go into places and seeing historical sites of ancient sites of myths and stuff like that. That interests me a lot more. So I think that there needs to be intention and there needs to be purpose for traveling. And if there isn't, I don't just like going away. I don't like that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like I say only ever, like if I'm going somewhere, there either has to be something that interests me. So it's either a tattoo shop that I'm going to get tattooed at, it's going to be a jiu-jitsu mat somewhere, or it's going to be, you know, like a Pyramids of Giza, or, you know,
something very significant.
Yeah, something. I also don't really like, you know, I say that, like me and my partner went to Portugal last year and we hired a car and we went up into the hills in Portugal and we did loads of walking and like that was great. Like it was great because we went and saw some shit and we did some shit. And of course, like we went to the beach and had a look at the beaches and the rock cliffs and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And that was nice as well. But yeah, like I struggle and would struggle, I think, to go somewhere for 2 weeks and sit on a sun lounger and do nothing.
But, you know, some people, I also understand that, you know, for example, my sister lives a very different lifestyle. She works in finance. She's in an office all day, and she's doing and she's working with numbers, and she loves to go on holiday. She just wants to go away. She wants to go to, she wants to sit on a beach, or she wants to go away. She wants to get out. She wants to go eat food in another country. And I understand that. I don't live as stressed a lifestyle, and therefore I don't have the desire to escape it that much, which a lot of people who are trapped in that the work environment feel like they need to escape. So I also, you know, that's just not for me. I'm not saying that that's a wrong way to look at things. It's just not for me. For me, there needs to be more purpose and intention. So, you know, what I'd really love to do, you know, and it's something, again, it depends on, you know, how many years it will be until the world's truly back to normal. Hopefully by 2021. But I'd love to go to other countries to explore their folk style of grappling. That's what I'm really interested in. So, because almost in the same way that stone lifting culture is the history of stone lifting is in many different cultures, wrestling is an ancient martial art, as ancient a sport as anything, if not the most ancient sport in the world. And every culture, unfortunately, a lot of them have died out. But the sports, the wrestling sports, the folk style wrestling sports, but many of them haven't, even if they're very tiny. And I want to go and explore those, and, you know, perhaps even document those, or make a little
that would be a
series about that. Yeah,
that would be phenomenal.
I need Netflix to pick me up. So if you know anyone on Netflix,
fuck it out. I don't know anyone. Full stop. I don't know anyone.
but that is actually a big dream of mine, is to get either the History Channel or Nat Geo or Netflix or something to produce a series where I can go around and explore wrestling styles from different countries, compete and train. And
so you're going to be the Ross Kemp of grappling documentaries.
That's the dream.
Excellent.
That is the dream.
Well, look, I think that's a phenomenal place to leave it, right? And I think before we do that, I want you to just shout out your YouTube channel, your Instagram, Bullingham, all those, Mill Hill, anything you want. Just go for it.
So the standard that I do at the end of the Raspberry 8 podcast is If you want to contact me, you can catch me on Instagram, which is raspberry_ape. Also Twitter, which is also raspberry_ape, but I don't use it as much as Instagram. Instagram is the one. I actually do have a Instagram for the podcast, which is at Raspberry Ape Podcast. Check out, if you want to check out Stones and Strangles or any of my podcasts you can find on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify. Just search for the Raspberry Ape Podcast. If you want to check out my YouTube channel, which has the videos of the podcast, and it also has the new series Stones and Strangles coming out every Tuesday and Friday, then go to youtube.com/Raspberry Ape. You can also check out my website, which is back online. You can pick up some cool merch, which is www.raspberryape.com. You can email me at podcast@raspberryape.com or dan@raspberryape.com. That's about it, really. Yeah, Bullingham. I will shout out Bullingham. Bullingham is Instagram at Bullingham Visual Media. I believe it's Bullingham
VMCO.
VMCO, yeah.
And the only other thing I'll add is Dan did a collaboration with Scramble for some lumberjack shit. If they're still selling it,
sold out, mate.
Really? Nightmare.
Yeah, lumberjack range you might be able to find. Just message Scramble and tell them to do a second run is what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Scramble and tell them to do a second run.
Look, thank you very, very much. That was phenomenal.
Pleasure, man. I enjoyed that.
Perfect. Well, look, I will catch you soon, my friend. Take care.
Take care, my brother.
All right.